Hello and welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see so many of you here. My name is Markko Paas. I am working in a company called It's Learning. We are creating educational software for schools and universities all over the world. And I am part of the team who is creating identity management and APIs, basically login and user authorization, stuff like that. And I'm going to talk about automated testing. So how many of you here have heard about this funny concept of tests being automated? Well, some of you know it. How many of you actually enjoy writing unit tests? Oh my God. There's quite a few. Okay, let's imagine that you are a developer in a company and then someone comes by and says that let's become agile. We know in agile everything must be automated. Let's create some tests. Can't be really hard, right? We know how to create programs, so let's create another program that tests the other program. Okay, how do we do that? Do we create unit tests, end-to-end tests? How do we do that? You keep thinking, and while you're thinking, eventually your project manager comes by and asks, what is it you're actually doing? What's the value of it? And then of course, soon after that, someone from accounting comes that, what is it our company is actually trying to achieve? Yeah. And the key to answer all these questions and also answer to accounting and project managers of how to create the tests and why do we do that is to understand the real business value of the tests. This way, all the questions can be answered, or that's the starting point actually. Before we know why, we have no way how to choose our ways. Obviously, it is not free, so we have to spend some effort on during creating the tests. And obviously, when we don't know that so well, then we are initially spending more time on that. And hopefully, after we have learned how to do that, we will stabilize and have a normal development pace. And what we hope is that, oh, that's the wrong thing. Yeah, what we hope is that when we have finally learned how to do that, then we become more efficient. We spend less effort. But if you present this to any businessman, obviously, give us more money, maybe in future you will get more efficiency back, right? No one will really buy that story. No sane businessman will accept it. So let's try to find what is the real business value in related to automated tests. Obviously, first thing that comes into mind when we're talking about testing is production defects. How often is something happening, and how much problems do we have? How bad are the problems? But it is possible to write your tests in such a way that you can actually describe your business requirements It is possible if you do it in correct way. And I can illustrate with this scenario. Before I became developer, again, I was project manager, and you can imagine that there is a development project, and obviously a project manager goes to the developer, sits on his desk, and asks, is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Well, until it's ready, right? Well, eventually developer says that, okay, I committed it. Okay, but project manager still doesn't know if it's ready, right? It's committed, and developer also cannot say anything better. So that's where automated tests could help. If it works, then it's ready. Similar thing can be for technical specification. If you are able to write your tests in a format of technical specification, then they will always be accurate, right? Because it's the proof. Well, you can always write your technical specification, for example, in Javadoc, and then it doesn't need to be as accurate, right? Because it's not tested. In addition to documentation, everyday work. If you have your system covered with tests, then this becomes a safety net. You can imagine a developer being like a stunt artist. There would be absolutely no way to learn new stunt tricks if you don't have something soft under you, right? So in software development, this means that every time you make a change, you try to modify the existing system as little as possible. So you add tiny bits until you have this, this pile of something that you better not touch. If you have the safety net, you can actually avoid this. So this is for benefits for the daily development work. Flexible design. I was considering using word modular design. Yeah. If you are trying to cover your system with tests, then your system has to be modular, because you have to access all the different behaviors and bits of your system. So even if you don't admit it or don't, then you will end up with modular system when you're trying to test or cover it with unit tests. And finally, it obviously depends on what kind of software are you creating. But I find it that running unit tests is often so much more simpler and quicker than trying to execute the code. Yeah, it is possible. And how often in your company testers will say that, oh, this line of code has never been executed by the developer, probably. No way this kind of bug would have appeared if it has been executed just once. Okay. This is a model of a system. We have components. Components are modules of the system that can be easily replaced. They have a well-defined interface between them. So you can rip it out and replace with something else. And each of the components consists of units. Unit is defined here as the smallest piece that you can access for smallest piece that your tests can use. Okay. So what kind of strategies can we use for testing this kind of system? Obviously, if we don't have automated tests, then we run manual tests, we set up the entire system, and we cover all the scenarios manually. What is we can do this, we can automate this fully. This means that we set up the entire system and then run some automation tools and execute the entire system. Acceptance test. Acceptance test is for ensuring that business requirements are fulfilled. But often business requirements don't need the entire system because you actually have to execute the piece where your business logic is. So sometimes you can avoid some layers. So acceptance test typically, or in our case, we don't run entire suite for acceptance tests. Then we can have individual component tests. This means that we use the normal component interface and we simulate all the dependencies. So we don't use actually any others. We replace them with something that we can control. And then similarly, we have unit tests, which use mocks for the dependencies. And some of the units, of course, are not using external dependencies. They are depending on the units of the same component. This means that we need to mock some of our own units. If you can also choose to not mock it, but use the real one. But then you will end up like integration or component test, which is not always wrong. Okay, so you might ask, why do we want to have all these tests if we can cover entire system with end-to-end tests? Yeah, I guess some of the companies do that.
Is it test-driven development?
Yeah,
would like
test.
to run tests fast and not one.
Yeah, and I left a bit room here for that thing. That is one of the good reasons why you want to have these tests, because of this slash here means single test and entire suite. So manual would be, I guess, minute for a test. I have to say that in our team, we don't actually have any testers. We don't use testers. But this might be, of course, because of our type of the product. End-to-end test means that our automation tool needs to run the web browser and make the calls, and then needs to prepare the database and have the server running and everything. So this means that setting up the test, even when automated, it takes some time. This one is also using the browser layer. We use WebDriver for that. And this causes it still to be slow. And you see that running the library only is 1,000 times faster. And this difference here, this makes day and night difference for the work process for the developer. And indeed, this means that you can let tests drive your development process, test-driven development. I don't know where I got this hours from, because it should be really a question mark, because we have never done that.
Question, you have this edit,
Yeah.
but you have this 2 minutes for end-to-end.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
And for acceptance,
Yeah, that is connected to the fact that acceptance test is testing business requirements, and end-to-end tests is testing that the system is working. We don't really need that many tests. Actually, I don't know why 30 seconds times 2 is 2 minutes. We actually have only two tests for integration. But we have 50 tests for the business requirements. Well, this is roughly correct. 50 times 10 seconds, yeah, almost. Did I answer your question? Because there is so much less end-to-end tests than there are business requirement tests. Okay, so now we have business value, categories, what kind of business value can we expect, and we have also list of possible strategies that we might want to use. And if we want to come back to our first initial puzzle question of how do we do things, then we just need to have this map. This will show us how to write unit tests, how to write component tests, how to write end-to-end tests, how to write acceptance test, smoke test, exploratory test. So this table might be a bit controversial, and I will explain it. So first, let's start from the production bug area. You might think that it is surprising that unit tests actually don't contribute much. They are not very useful for production bug prevention. And the reason for that is that when a developer is working with a unit, then it is in front of him, and it's really rare if you can make a bug in there. It's possible, but it's possible because it's quarter here, right? But it's much more likely that you are failing with parameters or interfaces, stuff like that. So it's not really very useful. Another funny thing is smoke test. Why do I think that the smoke test is useful? Smoke test is something that when we deploy our system in production, then smoke test will either show that it works or it doesn't work. It has never been failing so far, but obviously if it would fail, then it gives us chance to revert the deployment immediately and reduce the impact, right? So it is unprobable, but very high loss that it can prevent. The next thing is acceptance test. And as I said before, if you write them in very specific way, then you can create very effective or efficient communication tool for entire company. And if I say that it can be done, then I can prove that we actually have done this. This is the real result of our acceptance tests. So we formatted our tests in sentences so that that they would be business requirements, and this way we know exactly that they are actually fulfilled. Okay, can I? Yeah. Okay. Technical specification is quite similar. If you care enough to write your unit tests in a format that is usable as technical specification, then you don't need any other tools for that. You can use tests. And the benefit, of course, is that they are always accurate. Another controversial thing might be this thing here. Why do I think that unit test is not that particularly good for refactoring? Well, it is good because it allows you to change the implementation, right? You have defined the tests so that you guarantee that the unit will do what it's supposed to do, and you are free to replace the implementation. And same goes, of course, for the component. But the thing is that when you are refactoring, then I have found that I most often throw away units and replace them with something else. This means that I will also lose the tests of that unit, and it is just more often when I rely on the component tests, just because I modify the units a lot. End-to-end test, again, it is not very good for two reasons. First of all, they are slow, and second is that we don't replace the entire component very often. It would be usable that if you want to switch your database engine, then you just switch it and just execute your end-to-end test and see if they work, right? But we just don't do it very often. Well, database engine is of course easy to replace, but any server implementation is a major project, right? It's not happening very often. I think I covered already the way what is flexible design and what is the debugging. Obviously, they are related with the unit tests. Okay, so how should we actually write the unit tests? I pulled up this line for reference. And so what do we learn from this? How should we do that? So because of the fact that we already get flexible design by separating our code into units, and we already anyway do the get the benefit of the executing the code more easily accessible manner. It is vital that we focus on describing what the unit is supposed to do. So this becomes the most important factor when you write unit tests. If you open any book about agile processes or XUnit or unit testing, you will find these 3 suggestions that it is good to chase coverage of 100%. Well, yeah, many people say that you don't need 100%. You can have 90 or 80 is good, or maybe you can do 70, or just just 10% is already quite good. So what I'd say that if it's 100, then it's 100. And given the tools that we have, it is not very hard to achieve. At least we have such nice tools. Atomic means that if you are specifying your software, you should test one fact separately from another. So if you notice that your test description says this function, if under these conditions, will do this and that, then you just split it and have two tests. Does this and does that. It is helpful. Independent. So when you're running your software, it is really efficient if you have your terminal window open and you will quickly see how your feature tests respond to your modification. This means that you have to have ability to quickly filter particular test or test suite. And this relies that this can be only done if your tests, every single test is independently runnable. If you would have such a test description that first you will create a big test data, and then first test will modify it this way, and then it that way, and then finally delete, and then test that all records are gone, then you cannot really easily just cut or just test one single sentence of it. So instead, you create these testing tools that allow you to set up the preconditions for each test separately. And this way you can nicely filter and execute each particular test independently. What I haven't found in any of the books and what we have experienced in Frontier, now is learning, it took us hard work to understand that you have to maintain the tests, because it's the same way how the same problem with not properly maintaining your software is that when you keep adding exceptions and differences in the bottom of the file, then you just lose the value that your unit specification describes what its intention is. So, in the same way how tests allow you to change the code, it is actually the opposite is true as well. You have a working code because the tests are working, so you are completely allowed to take the file of unit tests and rewrite the unit tests, and you are still sure that these two will cover each other. So code is covering tests and test is covering code. And so it is important that you keep the unit test descriptions and unit test file up to date. You should not be scared changing anything in there. And I think this one is the hardest thing to achieve. So what is the unit test description? The purpose is to describe the intention, right? You have only one chance to verify this. You have to find a person who doesn't know what you did. You have to show him the sentence. Does it make sense or does it not make sense? Once you explain him what you meant, then you cannot test on that person anymore because he already knows what you meant, right? So the test description must explain what was your intention. So as a code reviewer, you have to be critical to your colleague, and it is hard. It's like the problem with training pilots. If you have the captain and then what's the other sub-captain? It's really hard. Yeah? Co-pilot, yeah. It is really hard for co-pilot to comment on behavior of the captain. And in your software teams, you obviously have more senior persons and less senior persons, and who is going to review the most senior person, right? So even if you are less experienced, or it must be promoted so that that the person should be able to tell if the superior's code is not readable. Otherwise, the code review is pointless, really.
I think there is a box missing. That the huge benefit of having unit tests is actually reorganizing their code in a better way. It's super hard to write unit.
Yeah, this is this, but yeah.
So it's really hard to write unit tests on a big, huge monolithic chunk of code. You actually have to extract the pieces.
But yeah, it makes it hard, but it's. I didn't mention it because it's a natural thing you do. But so.
It comes for free if you write unit.
Yes.
But if they're missing,
so instead, right. Instead, you have basically two choices. Either you force yourself to write unit tests on the thing that doesn't lend very well to do that. It's one option, but it's really bad. The better option is to modify the component and have normal unit tests. I would not say that you have to write the test first. You can, but if you see the problem with your code, then you just go and fix it. Otherwise, you will soon leave the company, I guess, or attend to the hospital, mental. Okay. The next detailed instructions for the component tests. So we have the knowledge that component tests enable refactoring. So everything else is done by all the other types of tests. So we have to focus on making it allowing refactoring. For that, you want to cover entire component interface. We find it a bit tricky because there are nice tools for unit tests that measure the branch and line coverage, but we don't use any tools for measuring this. Maybe there are, but we have tried to have a look at it manually, or code review for that reason. It's not automatic. Avoid using internal components. This is also, of course, for enabling refactoring. If you use internal components, then modifying any of those will break your tests, even though the change was legal. So it's better to just fix the interfaces and not refer to anything inside. Yeah. So, what's the time? Good. We can have a lot of questions, I guess. Recap. The most important thing and the hardest to achieve. If anyone don't believe that it's hard, then they should try it. It is hard. Code review is your only chance for testing readability. it tends to be that people want to change as little as possible. But if you have code and tests covering each other, then you are allowed and promoted to modify more than a minimum. It might help for communication if you create acceptance tests instead of having separate testers team who have their own interpretation of the business requirements. And why is it very good that developers write acceptance tests is that then it will be very clearly documented how developers interpret the business analyst's input. Developer can say that, yeah, I understand what you meant by this requirement, but if the developer writes how it understood it, then there can be a discussion between project manager and business analyst whether this or that thing should be implemented or not. Some companies need technical specification, especially those companies that have more than one person working in it. Yeah, or if you're working more than 3 months on a project, you might want to know what you meant, what your earlier self was meaning half a year ago. It is hard. You cannot have a discussion really with your former self. So if you're already writing unit tests, then write it such a way that they make some sense. Yeah, interface coverage. Oh, I was planning to stop here, but there are a bit more materials coming afterwards. So I used X-unit test patterns. This is a nice book, but when coming back to the first sample company scenario, is that this book is this thick, so it contains all the patterns in the world, and if you have all of them, then you still don't know which one should you actually do. We have microservice testing instructions and Wikipedia. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. So, do you look right now only on testing from the developer's point of view? Because
Well,
you
it was
don't
it.
see anything from
No, you see, you do see.
Yes.
This one.
Well, acceptance.
It is.
The
This
business
acceptance. Yeah, what I mean here is that
Developers writing business acceptance testing.
yes,
Right?
and it is because of this document. Okay, I can show you the document. This document, because it's written by developers, it shows developers' interpretation of the business requirement.
Isn't
And-
the working code the developer's interpretation of the requirement? Is it-
Sorry?
Is a developed product is not enough for that? I would say that from my point of view, this somebody else should test and then see what developers did is the same as somebody is checking.
Yeah.
Why to do it twice? Developing the product and also testing same what he did.
So the problem is that business analyst is responsible for documenting or deciding or finalizing their business requirements, right? And then it is responsibility of the developer to understand those. But the developer has to reflect it somehow. No, he has to reflect it to the business analyst. He can nod, yes, I understood what you said to me. Okay, but usually it is better if you reflect it in a dialogue that, Is it this what you meant, right? So this is the reflection from the developer back to the project manager, back to the business analyst. This is how I understood your business requirement. So it can come from the business analyst. So that initial list statements like that come from business analyst. And if a developer can use it the way how it is, then there's no problem. It's going to be identical, right? If developer cannot implement it the way how it is stated, then for the company it is really effective. For example, what developer has to say is that okay, I can implement the thing that you wanted, but it's going to cost 2 million, right? But I can do it also the other way, and then it will cost you 200,000. So this is only a developer who can respond it. So you have to have this kind of dialogue, and potentially this could be the dialogue. It could be initialized by giving the requirements from the business analyst, and then you have to reflect it back.
Don't you worry, please, the beer is coming soon.
As I understood, you have no monkey test.
I have it here. We don't have it in practice, but I have it in the screen because I think it's important. It's this one. We don't call them monkeys; we call them explorers, because if they have the book of the test scenarios that they have to follow, then they are monkeys. If they get a system and they try to break it, then they are explorers, and this is why they are important. But
You have them on higher because you said that.
in our product we don't need it, but I believe that for a typical project you would need that. We actually do have it in our. Well, our project is actually also module for user authentication. This means that we have manual testing, but they are testing the actual clients. So if the scenario is so that you open a client and try to log in, then the client manual testers will actually test our product as well and let us know if there is something problem with the login. Anything else?